Okay, so it is 12 midday and welcome everybody from around the world today. We've got people from every corner of the globe, so you are very, very welcome, whether you are a student already training with us or somebody looking to purchase one of our courses. You're all very welcome. And the subject of today's webinar is all about organising international events, which it's actually very timely. I was talking to our guest speaker today, Zoe Perkins, about this, and we were agreeing that even though we are in lockdown as a global industry, events are still going ahead. So we've got international events taking place. Everything is going on behind closed doors in terms of the planning, but we've also got virtual events starting to take place now, which can obviously, as you would imagine, be sort of global ventures. So I would like to introduce Zoe Perkins, who is if everybody could switch their microphones off, that would be great. Thank you. So Zoe Perkins is the founder of a company called Vodka on Toast. And Zoe has a wealth of knowledge and experience in organising various different events, from corporate to private parties on an international level. So Zoe, would you like to introduce yourself a little bit more and take us on your top tips on organising international events?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Claire, for that introduction. And hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining today. As Claire said, my name is Zoe Perkins and I'm the owner of Vodka on Toast. That's my company. And I started Vodka on Toast because I wanted to pursue my ambition as a freelance event manager. And that's what I do now. So I might work with agencies on collaborative events, or I might work with my own clients directly. The events that I'm working on can be anywhere in the world. So lots and lots of different countries that I've worked with. And as Claire was saying, the world right now is waking up to the possibilities of what can happen when we work remotely. What I would say is if you're an international event manager, you're already probably pretty clued up on how to get the best out of those long distance working relationships over kind of many countries and different areas that you might be working with. So, kind of getting the best out of those relationships is something that you need to be doing, whether we're in lockdown or not. You need to be able to make decisions and make plans for your events across the miles. It's not always possible. You're not necessarily going to get to do like a site visit. You might not get to meet these suppliers. So it's just about like, how can you kind of build rapport and make decisions, even though you're not in the same place and you haven't met in person. And it's very, very possible. I would say that organising international events involves many of the same steps as it would involve for organising an event in your home country. What I want to really focus on today is those extra things, extra considerations, different things that you might need to be thinking about that are just a little bit different when you're doing something in a different country. So with that in mind, I've got 8 top tips for you today that I'm going to go through, and hopefully you'll find these useful. Okay, so my first top tip for you is to allow extra time for everything. Just in general, if you're organising an event in a different country, everything's just going to take a little bit longer than you would usually expect it to. So when you're making your project plans and when you're thinking, how long do you need to do something, just try and overestimate in every aspect and you'll be okay. Few specific ways that this might affect you. One is in terms of kind of getting responses from your suppliers. So if you're working with a country that is maybe 8 hours time difference ahead or behind, that makes a big difference in terms of like how quickly you're going to hear back from someone. So if you try not to let anything get too urgent, and if you have something that is particularly urgent, pick up the phone to that supplier. That's going to be the best way around that. But in general, just you can anticipate that if there's a big time difference, then probably you send them an email one day, they're not going to read it until much later in your working day. It takes them a day to respond. It could take 48 hours to get a response on something. So don't be surprised by that. And especially if you have something urgent, try and kind of tackle that quickly. The other thing that I thought of in terms of kind of what takes a bit longer is shipping. Shipping can take quite a long time. If you're sending goods, equipment, sending that out maybe by a courier, it's going to take time. It's going to take longer than it would take if you're just kind of sending it locally. So first of all, you need to take advice from your DHL or whoever you're using as a courier. Ask them, how long does it take to ship something to West Africa or to America, or check. But also find out about customs, because customs can be a really big delay in getting your equipment out there. So make sure that you've got the right paperwork for customs, and anticipate that it could be 5 days, 10 days maybe being held, and that you're sending your things way, way, way ahead of time, so that you know that your things are going to be there when your event starts. And yeah, talking about starting your event, the other thing is travel. If you're actually traveling to the event that you've organized, don't plan to arrive an hour before the setup. Don't fly in that morning unless you have to. If there's any way possible, I would recommend traveling the day before. You need to be allowing contingency time for flight delays, missing your transfer, something goes wrong, takes too long to get a taxi, something could happen. Especially if it's a country you've not traveled to before, immigration could take a while, you just don't know. So just give yourself more time for everything in general. So my second top tip for you is around public holidays. So when you're setting the date for your event, there's lots and lots of things to consider, but this is a specific one if you're doing an international event, because you need to be thinking about public holidays, bank holidays, school holidays, and religious holidays. They're all really important. You need to know if there's any diary clash with the date that you're choosing for your event, and you need to be looking at that for the country that you're holding your event in. But also, if you have an international audience that are coming in for the event, you need to be checking their diaries as well. You need to be just making sure, and this isn't on a kind of individual level, but if there's a major public holiday happening, you probably want to avoid it, depending on the nature of your event, because people are likely to be taking time off, having their own holidays. They're not necessarily going to be coming to events. Or maybe you want to time it. If it is an event that people would go to while they're having time off, maybe you want to have an awareness of when those public holidays might be, when people might be away from work. So just kind of try and look into that, have a bit of a kind of some mindfulness around that. I realized that you can't please everyone. You're not gonna be able to get 100% of people available for something, but if you are looking at that, then just make sure you're checking that your key stakeholders can make it, your main speakers, and that they're happy, and maybe kind of focus on those people. So yeah, that's my advice for you around those. Similarly, something else you should be looking at as soon as you start planning your event is what the time zone is. So check what time zone it is in the country that you're organizing, and what's the time difference between your working day and their working day. In the planning of your event, you need to be thinking about what time it is for your audience when you're doing certain things, like I don't know, like if you're sending your email invitation, or you're sending some briefing notes to someone in your audience, you need to send that to them at a suitable time for them during their working day, rather than your working day. So try and make sure that you understand kind of, you're not sending something to people in the middle of the night for them. You'll get much better responses that way. And similarly, I mentioned earlier about working with suppliers. Get the best out of the relationships and get hold of them at the right time. You need to know what time they're working in. So you can even put it on post-its and say, look, 9 a.m. for me is 6 a.m. for them, or whatever, and just kind of keep it on your desk so that you can have that in the back of your mind. Another thing to remember, some of you will know this already, but depending on daylight saving time, the time difference can change as well. So, New York is a great example. Sometimes they're 4 hours behind, sometimes they're 5 hours behind, depends on daylight savings time. So just be aware of that. There's a website called timeanddate.com, which I use all the time, especially if I'm organizing meetings for people that are all in like 4 different time zones. Timeanddate.com will tell you on this date what time everybody is at work and what time is 9 a.m. for everyone, and that kind of thing. So it's just like super, super useful. When you're planning your event, this is kind of going to affect you. As you're getting nearer to your event, it's going to affect you more and more, because things become more urgent. So maybe think about shifting your working day if you can, and if it's quite a big time difference, think about shifting your working day to be a little bit more in sync with the people you're working with. If you're working with a company in New York and your event's going to be in New York, then maybe you want to start your day a little bit later and then finish your day a little bit later to be in sync. Obviously I'm saying this from my point of view. I'm based in London, but I appreciate that lots of you are from different countries here. So it's just kind of understanding like what that means for you and your working day and being able to adjust that accordingly. I would also add that the Middle East don't work a Monday to Friday working week, and that's kind of an extra thing to consider, is that not everyone does the Monday to Friday working week. The Middle East work on a Sunday to Thursday working week, and that makes a big difference if that's the place that you're organising your event. So just being in tune with that and being in sync is going to be really good for you. Know your exchange rate. Budgets are always super important anyway, and having control of your budget is really important. So like knowing what your exchange rate is in the country that you're working with is gonna really help you, and it's gonna have a big impact on you keeping control of your budget. Now, on like the first thing that I would be doing when I know that I'm organizing an event somewhere is I'm looking up what's the local currency, what's the exchange rate between the currency of my budget and the currency of that local currency, but also check with your suppliers what currency you're going to be charged in, because it won't necessarily be the local currency. An example of this doesn't happen very often, but one example of this is in Nigeria. The local currency is the Nigerian naira. However, your hotel, your AV supplier, they're very likely to be charging you in US dollars, and that makes a big difference. So you need to know that upfront so that you can plan that into your budgeting. When you're on site, you also need to be thinking about like having that information in your mind. So when you're at an event, we have to make quick decisions as event managers all the time about additional equipment or additional services that we might need. When you're making those decisions, you need to know how much something costs. So if you need to book an extra, like an upgrade for a VIP or a microphone that needs adding into your bill with the AV company, and they say it's going to cost you 3,000 yen, do you know how much that costs roughly? Do you have a sense of that so that you can approve that quickly? And then, that way you keep more in control of what you're doing. Be culturally sensitive. This is a really important one if you're working in different countries. I think on a really basic level, to me, this just means kind of being polite according to the rules of the country that you're in, so that you don't offend people. But on top of that, it's also about like, how does this specifically impact your event? Well, there's kind of lots of ways in which you can make sure that you're being culturally sensitive. A language is a big one. So, do you know what the language is in the country that you're going to, and do you know that your audience is going to speak that language, or are they going to speak English? What language are your presenters planning on speaking in? And just like having an awareness of that and asking the right questions is important. Don't just assume that everybody speaks English or a particular language. And there are options available to you. So make sure that your event is accessible. Look at translation software. Look at like actually having translators come in with, and they hand out headphones to the speakers, and they record the session and translate it live. That sort of kind of service is great when there may be a bit of a language barrier. And as an event manager, if you have a responsibility to kind of have a think about those things beforehand. The other things you might want to think about would be, are you able to cater for a wide variety of dietary requirements which you might come across? So can the venue cater for a halal diet, a kosher diet, for example? Find out what is customary in terms of greetings. Is handshaking acceptable? In some places it's not recommended, in some places it is. Is the country that you're going to, do they have regular prayer meetings and prayer breaks? And have you built your agenda in a way that accommodates for that and is kind of sensitive to the needs of the audience? So it's things like this that it's just like really important that you have thought about it and had some conversations about it. Similarly, just have a general awareness of kind of the political, socio-economic climate of the place that you're going to. For example, if there's political unrest in the place that you're organizing an event in any part of the country, that's something that you should think about while you're planning your event, and also while your event's taking place, just so that you can kind of really understand where it is that you're going, what's going on there, and just kind of understanding the wider context of the place that you're going to beyond your event helps you to kind of show that level of cultural sensitivity. So perhaps unsurprisingly, if you're organizing an event in a different country, perhaps the people that you're dealing with and the suppliers that you're working with might not be English, might not be the first language that they speak. It might be a second or third language to them. So my advice to you is wherever you're going, just try and learn a few words to show willing in terms of participating in kind of conversation with someone who might be speaking a different language in order to communicate with you. So, learn how to say hello, thank you, good morning. Little things like that really go a long way. Now, being realistic, it is very likely that most places that you go someone will be able to speak English and be able to work with you like that, because English is recognized as an international business language. But just to kind of have an appreciation for the fact that you may not be working in your native language, the people that you're working with might not be working in their native language. It's very, very common. And because of that, miscommunication happens all the time. Miscommunication and misinterpretation of information is fairly regular occurrence. So kind of expect it to happen, kind of leave sort of space for it. And my advice to you in terms of dealing with these situations would be in kind of any engagement or any kind of supplier relationship, I use a combination of phone calls or video calls and email, and I think it's really important that you use both. So you need the phone calls for face-to-face contact. You can hear tone of voice, you can kind of understand a little bit better what that person like what mood they might be in, or like the tone of what they're trying to convey. You can cover more in a phone call if you're having a conversation, and it just it builds rapport, it builds connection between people, and it's really, really important. So like, you can't try and organize everything by email. At the same time, you also need to make sure that you're getting things in writing, because clarity over really important details like price, deadline, that kind of thing, you probably want to get those sorts of things in writing anyway, but it's sort of doubly important when people might be having to translate things, and just to make sure that everything's super clear and in writing. So the best way, I think, to minimize miscommunication is just to kind of go for a combination of both of those things, and just be patient, I guess, with everybody, and just appreciate that people might take a little bit more time to process conversations. My seventh tip for you is to use local suppliers. If it's possible, use a local supplier. I think when you're planning your event, be reasonable about how much equipment you really need to send, what things do you need to be sending over, and what people do you need to be taking to the event, and try, if you can, to minimize that by using local suppliers. And that might be for your AV, obviously you'd be using a local venue, but staffing, catering, entertainment, even things like production companies or printers or that kind of thing, try and use the local suppliers, because it's a win-win-win to me. It's better on your budget. It's probably going to cost you less if you're using local suppliers and you're not having to ship things over there, but it's also more environmentally friendly. And I think as event managers, in this day and age, we have a responsibility to be thinking about the ways in which we can make our events more environmentally friendly and more globally friendly. And so you're sending less people to the event, it's less airfares, it's less shipping, that kind of thing, but also you're supporting the local community of the place that you're going to by employing people that work in that local community. So you're supporting the community, you're creating jobs, and for your event, the benefit is it's going to be cheaper probably, and you're injecting a bit of local flavor into where you're going, so it's not so homogenized. You're actually kind of getting a little bit of kind of the local flavor of the people that live there and work there. And in return, they're likely to understand local customs more. They're probably going to work together as suppliers. They probably speak similar languages or the same language. So it's just like all round, I think it's a bit of a win. It's not always possible, but I certainly would be looking for the best opportunities to do that. Okay, so I realised that I have whizzed through quite a lot of information just then. So this is my final top tip to you, which is if you don't remember any of the other things that I just said and you just focus on one thing, I think it would probably be this one. Ask for advice. It's really important. You know, ask someone who lives in that country how something might be done and what is customary. Try and have that level of sensitivity by actually just asking the question if you're not sure about something. And you know, you can ask an event manager who's organized an event there already, what's the best way of doing something? What have they learned from organizing an event there already? So like learn from that experience. And also like ask your hotel and ask your suppliers what is their advice on getting the most out of your event. And I think if you do that, if you ask questions, you know, stay curious, ask for advice, show willing, and just be respectful, I think it will really, really help you. Okay, throwing a bonus tip in here. This is a personal one rather than a business one, but it's something that I think is really good advice, and I wish that somebody had told me this, which is actually leave your hotel if you can. In events, it is very easy to be very, very busy, and especially when you're on site, your event can feel very overwhelming and it feels like you just have to be there the whole time and it's busy, busy, busy. But you know, if you don't ever see anything other than the airport and your venue and then back again, you're kind of doing a disservice to the country that you're visiting. So if you can, and if it's safe to do so in the country that you're in, like try and just get out, go for a walk in the morning for 10 minutes, go to a coffee shop and buy a coffee, like do something. Something that I will do often is on my way back to the airport, I'll ask my taxi to come for me 30 minutes earlier. I'll give them an extra bit of money and ask them to take me the scenic route home. So I'll say, look, can you show me a couple of sites, take me by a supermarket so I can buy something. Just like make sure that you're making the most of the opportunity, make the most of the privilege it is to travel internationally for your events, and make sure that you're actually really enjoying your trip as well. Okay, so and that's everything from me in terms of what I was going to share for my top tips today, but I'm really happy to elaborate on anything that I've already said or answer your questions. I can see that there's a few questions coming through in the chat already, so I'm going to let Claire take over from here and we can kind of keep chatting. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. There were some really great tips. And I have to say, your last bonus tip is really important. It is good and it's healthy to get out of your hotel or your venue and see the sights because, you know, you might be going back with a different client. So the more you can sort of integrate yourself culturally within a country and a region, the better equipped you're going to be with new clients on recommending areas for them to have their events. Do you agree?
I do. I do. I think there's so much to be gained from kind of being in tune with what a country's really like, and to do that, you need to get out of the hotel. You need to see something more. Yeah.
Yes. Good. So we have had a few questions. So the first one was from Learning Technology. I'm afraid I don't have your name, but they've said, hi Zoe, I imagine that you have multiple international events happening at any one time. Do you have any advice on managing your day to fit with time zones across different countries you have planned events in?
Yes. Yeah, I see what you mean. So I guess what you're saying is potentially if you're doing an event in Asia and an event in America, then you could be sort of potentially working around the clock. Um, uh, Personally, I mean, what would I do? I mean, I'd probably end up splitting my day. So in that scenario, I'd probably do an early shift where I would get up early, do maybe a 4 hour day, do all the kind of communications with the event going on in Asia, and then I'd probably take a long break in the middle and then I'd clock on again in the evening and kind of work with the people in America. And I would sort of probably think about splitting my day like that. It's not ideal, is it? So I mean, I wonder in that scenario whether are there teammates that can help you in terms of keeping work continuously moving, and also just what can you do to be clear and communicate clearly with the people that you're working with of what's going on. So tell your suppliers, look, I'm also working on events at these times. These are the hours that I'll be working. I'm going to try and clock in with you at these points of the week, and just like have that as a kind of in your diary so that you're not working around the clock, because it's so easy to work around the clock in events. So yeah, just trying to set up that kind of regular contact with suppliers so that they know when to hear from you would be my advice.
Great stuff, thank you. And Summer has asked the question, are there any specific websites you would research the exchange rates? And I know, Claire, thank you, you came up with xe.com, which I've used before. Do you have any other sites that you use, Zoe?
If you want a quick and dirty one, just Google it. You can literally just Google how much is $100 in pounds, and Google will spit something out for you. But if you want something more accurate, then I also use xe.com.
Great.
Um, yeah. The other thing that I've experienced is that when I've worked in big corporates, they tend to actually fix the exchange rate. So I appreciate that the exchange rate changes every day, but if you're working in a big company, probably they tell you at the start of the year what the exchange rate is that you should use, and then you just use that the whole time, and you don't worry about small fluctuations day to day.
Fantastic. Learning Technologies has also asked another question. What tools do you use to ensure that you are aware of cultural differences and that themes you use for your events are appropriate? And do you have contacts in the country that you work with? And I think it's probably, I had a question as well, is like, how do you research appropriate cultural themes for your events?
Yes, yeah. My main thing is that I talk to people, like I talk to human people, and I talk about their experiences, and I talk to people that live in that country, people that regularly present in that country, and I try and learn from their experience. Of course, you can go on the internet and do your own research of, kind of suggestions and kind of, but it's hard to kind of find a reliable source, and anyone can write anything on the internet. So I find the best thing is just to talk to people, like talk to people about what they think, and ask for feedback. Don't make assumptions about what's acceptable and not acceptable, and don't get too caught up in your particular perception of something. Just try and make sure that you're vetting your theme or your suggestions or anything, if with other people. And if you're working with people and you see something that they've done for your event that doesn't necessarily sit well with you, or you might have questions about, or you might think, well, I'm not sure that is sensitive enough, or I'm not sure that is going to be appropriate for this particular audience, don't be afraid to find a way to challenge them nicely and have a conversation about that, because it's important that we have those conversations.
Mm, yeah, absolutely right. Um, Raquel has said that there's a fantastic book for people interested in intercultural intelligence called The Culture Map. So I've never read it, but it's going to be on my reading list. So go and check it out, The Culture Map. Kim has asked, have you had any instances where cultural differences either shocked you or hindered your event plan, and how did you overcome them?
Yeah, yeah, trying to think. It can be interesting sometimes, that in the Middle East particularly, there are some very specific rules about whether men and women can be in the same room or the same space, for example. So if you're organising, I've organised events before in Saudi where the venue had contractually included in our contract the fact that we had to separate the men and the women from the event, and that kind of clashed with the cultural, like, company standards of the company I was working for, which is an American company. And that actually took months to resolve it. It wasn't me that worked through it. It was actually the legal teams, because there's legal teams on both sides that want to have these contracts in place, but also you have to be sensitive to the needs of the people in the country and the local customs. And I think a compromise was reached in the end, in terms of we were allowed to invite everybody to the event and make it an exclusive event, but the seating was separate in the room, for example. So things like that can be really different if you've never experienced something like that, and if you have kind of personal feelings about it, you have to be able to kind of keep those in check and just work through them methodically and respectfully on behalf of everyone.
Mm.
I don't know, hopefully that answers your question.
I've got two examples actually. The first one is I was organising an event in Abu Dhabi, and it was in the very early planning stages. And I'd gone over there for a recce, and I was due to meet with some dignitaries in the local region. And I wore what I thought was an appropriate dress. It was long sleeves, it was
Mm,
a high, but it was just above the knee. And as I walked into the meeting, I was taken aside by one of the local women, and she said, "Your dress is actually inappropriate." And at the time, I was wearing a very, very light coat, lightweight coat that I had to keep on the entire meeting because it was actually down to my calves, and I had to cover my legs. So it was something that it is what it is. It's their culture, and I made a mistake, and I certainly didn't make the mistake twice. The other thing for me, and Zoe, I don't know whether you found this, is in some countries, some people would say that I'm quite forceful when I organise my events, and I'm quite demonstrative. I think I'm just to the point, and I go in. I have a very clear idea of what I want, and that's what I want. And in some countries like maybe the United States or Britain, that's fine to be like that. But there are other cultures, for example, the Japanese culture, where if you go in like a bit of a bull in a china shop and you say, "I want this, 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 and this," and you get straight to business, that's not how they work. You have to go through all of the social stuff first before you then talk about the business side of things.
mm.
And I've learned that over the years. That's a tricky one, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think a lot of these things are you kind of learn by experience or learn by other people's experience of sharing that with you. And yeah, certainly. But I sort of love all of those things, those little different nuances of different countries. It's sort of part of the joy of um, traveling, and traveling for events is, I feel like it's sort of my privilege to be learning all of those sorts of things. It's great.
Absolutely, I totally agree with you. Lawrence has asked, do you use DMCs in the host country? So, for those of people who don't know what a DMC is, it's a destination management company. So, do you use them, Zoe?
Yes, sometimes is the short answer. It does depend on the event. If it is a small-ish event, and by that I mean it's maybe just one day, you're working in one venue with one hotel, and you're confident that you're able to communicate with that one supplier, then I probably wouldn't use a DMC for something like that. But if you're organizing something that is maybe multiple days, lots of people flying in from different countries, maybe your event is taking place in a hotel, but also you visit a restaurant and you need to source different suppliers of different things, absolutely I would be working with a DMC for that if I had the budget. And if you didn't have the budget, I think you'd probably struggle for something on that sort of scale, unless you were mega familiar with that location already, or kind of super fluent in the language as well. Because the other thing, the benefit of the DMC is that they can get decent deals for you, and they have good supplier connections, but they're also very likely to be able to speak the language. And if you don't speak the language, they're going to be a much better representative for you. So yeah, absolutely, I love working with DMCs, and they are really really useful, and they are great for that local knowledge of suppliers, and also just great for like how things work. DMCs are used to working with people that might not necessarily know the culture of a place, so they're great people to ask as well, just about, is it okay to do this, is it okay to say this, is it okay to wear this, what do you think? They'll be great to offer that sort of advice.
Mm, fantastic. They're worth their weight in gold. And
Mm.
aside from a DMC, Ivana has asked, how can you ensure quality when you work with local suppliers you don't know personally?
Mm, mm. Yeah, the gamble of choosing a new supplier who you can't actually meet face to face, and can't sort of vet beforehand. How do you tackle it? DMCs is one of the things. Can another company that you trust vouch for them? Do they have reviews available? Are they able to show you a portfolio of the work that they've done before? Are you able to kind of check their references, check their credentials? If they have sort of, standards of, if they're kind of registered for any kind of industry standards, can you check the credibility of those standards, that sort of thing. And also, if it's possible, find an event manager that's organized an event there before and say, look, I'm thinking about using the supplier. What was your experience with them? And I guess, you'd be doing that if you were organizing something in your hometown and you needed to use a supplier there that you'd never used. It was just sort of like using those avenues of just checking the references to make sure that everything's in order. But, I think events are unpredictable, and sometimes there is a level of you don't know until you get on the site. I've done events in different countries where I've not been able to do a site visit. It's happened regularly. There's just not the budget to send you out, and you've looked at it on the internet and you've looked at every photo of the hotel and what does it look like and what does is it good enough. But until you get there, you don't know for sure. But you need to live with that level of uncertainty. As an event manager, I think we can make the best plans that we possibly can, and we can do our very best. But on the end, when the event goes live, you don't know exactly how it's going to go, and you just sort of have to learn to roll with that and be flexible, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And Meg and Susan have both asked interesting questions about exchange rates. So Meg has asked, do you have any tips to anticipate exchange rates when you're planning an event so far in advance, with fluctuating changes, particularly
Mm.
as you plan for in the budget initially may turn out to be quite different due to the exchange rates?
Yeah, yeah. It's actually, I saw these questions coming through, and I've been sort of trying to think about it in the background because it is a really difficult one, especially if you're a business owner and you are ultimately responsible for any loss that might be made if those exchange rates change. Something you can do is you can kind of lock in exchange rates at contract stage, potentially. So you can sort of agree, on kind of prices that are going to be paid. You can also potentially agree to pay in the same currency, depending. So perhaps everybody agrees to pay in US dollars, and depends on the company you're working for in terms of how their finance works. But it's a really difficult one, and especially in terms of like big changes in interest rates. I don't know really what I would think about doing much beyond that. Potentially, I think the idea of sort of building in a buffer into your budget is quite a good idea. But obviously, if you're setting budgets for an event, you want to make sure that you're offering good value for money as well. So if you build in too much of a buffer, then that company is maybe going to go with someone else who's a bit cheaper. So it can be risky, can be a really risky one. And we need to kind of give a bit more thought to that. But what I would say is, if you're working with bigger companies, they are probably, and when I say if you're working for bigger companies, I mean like you as the event manager are working using a bigger company's budget, whether you're working for a corporate or whether your client is a large agency. Their finance team will build in some buffer into their business model around those exchange rates. So it doesn't necessarily sit with you as the event manager to be responsible for that. If it's your business and if it's you selling a piece of work to a company overseas, then I think probably you would need to be building in some buffer into your own company and some contingency planning for those sorts of changes. But hopefully that sort of gives some ideas. But it's a really difficult one.
It is, and I think Sue Gaffney, you asked a sort of similar question, and as a student that's done one of our live courses, you will know that we constantly go on about contingency planning, and that's
Mm.
in your logistics planning, in your strategic planning, and also in your budgets. There has to be contingency in there. So sorry to bang on about it again, Sue. Vanya has asked, any special recommendations for international events that are happening online right now? Because we're going to see a big surge in online events, aren't we?
Mm. Yeah, it's great actually. I'm sort of loving it. These sort of things like these like webinars and these like online conferences, like they've existed, but no one's really put any kind of finesse into them. And what I'm seeing now is that with everything that's going on, people are like, right, how can we put our conference online? But it's not just enough to just stream it. Like we want it to make it look good, and we want the content to be right, and we want to get the camera angles right. And and so it's not something that I work on personally. but what I'm seeing other people doing in the industry is really interesting in terms of like upping the quality of those events, and that, you know, that might be making them available in different languages, or just making sure that their technology works, just like really basic stuff like making it easy for people to register, get access. You know, is there any sort of like translation available? You know, that, you know, how do you make these events accessible to people globally? Yeah, it's so really interesting, the things that people are working on at the moment.
Yeah, and if nothing else, event professionals are enthusiastic, passionate about what they do, and we will find a way around, and we will find a way to make online events really professional and engaging
Mm,
and exciting. So watch this
mm,
space.
yeah.
Yohei has said, how do you contact possible customers from other countries, and how do you compete with the event agencies in those countries?
Yeah, good question. Good question. I mean, I suppose depends um depends who's decided to organize the event, I guess. So, you know, it's probably unlikely that a company in another country who's organizing an event in that country for people from that country would necessarily like come to the UK to grab an event management team and take them over. It's not impossible, but like probably not. But you know, working on more of an international basis, let's say you work for a big global corporate, you probably have a central events team that make decisions about what events are going to happen and where. So that sort of like competition element is maybe taken out of it a little bit, because you've got a global program and it makes sense for one team to be working on everything to get that continuity of service. Um, you know, in terms of how do you market your events, I think, you know, it depends on the event, but it's the same way that you would market anything. You know, I'd be working with the event marketing team and marketing people that do kind of marketing strategy to say like, is this something that we're publicizing by social media? Is it something we're doing email marketing? Is it, you know, we're doing kind of face-to-face invitations, that sort of thing? And you'd be working on your marketing strategy the same way that you would for any event, but you're just adding in that extra layer of, okay, well, we need to target people in all of these countries but not these countries, or maybe we need to be targeting people that are interested in these specific products, and you'd be, you know, getting data, like lists of data based on that. So yeah, I think it's quite similar to how you would approach it for a local event. It's just maybe, you know, can be a bit harder work to find the right people. But then if you don't, you know, that's something you'd need to be like, don't start planning your event until you know that you can reach your audience, if you know what I mean. Like, you know who your audience is and know that you have access to them and that there's a way that you can get to them. And if not, then you know, it's going to be difficult for you. So just, yeah, making sure that you have access to those people on the off would probably be a good start.
Yeah. I think as well, for many small to medium-sized agencies, it's all about word of mouth. It's who you know, but it's the clients that you've worked with before who, if you've done a good job, will say, "I know Zoe. She's really great. You should
Mm.
contact her because she will do a good job." So it's the reputation that you have that goes before you, I think.
Mm, yeah, yeah, absolutely.
We've got a few minutes left. We've got one more question to take from somebody who's written it down. But if anybody wants to actually switch on their camera and ask Zoe a question kind of face to face, please do. Just type yes, and then I'll just invite you to switch your camera on. So there's one question from Kim, and she's put, "What has been your favourite international event that you've planned so far, and why?" It's a good question.
Yes, yes, good question. Um, favorite favorite event. My favorite events that I've organised have been incentive trips, because incentive trips are all about giving something back to your workforce, rewarding them for doing well for your company, and just like showing them a really good time, and like showing them a place that they've not been to before, that they might not have access to before, and like giving them these like amazing experiences. So for me, working on incentives is mega fun. You know, it's a very busy job, but it's really, really, really great fun, because you're essentially just sort of like, oh, you know, what destination do these people want to go to? What are the kind of like, you know, new in vogue places? What can we show them that's really different? And like, if you're lucky enough to get to go on that incentive too, then you get to go. So For me, I did I can't cheat. I did California, which was amazing, and Tuscany. Tuscany was really beautiful, but I think an incentive in California was probably my favorite thing that I did. It was really, really good fun. Yeah.
Fantastic. And I think my favourite event would be an international challenge event, because my area is charity and international events. And I did an international trek in Vietnam, and I was one of the first people to go in
Mm.
and do something like that. So that was really special, and I still have fond memories. So, Lawrence, you have a question, and you'd like to switch your camera on to ask Zoe personally. So go ahead. Hi, Lawrence.
Hi there. Sorry, my name's Lorraine. Everyone always calls me Lawrence. That's my
Hi.
surname. Everyone always calls me Lawrence. Hi, Zoe. My question is, and you've just been talking about incentive trips, and I actually work for a pharmaceutical company, and
Mm.
I do all of their incentive trips, and I'm the same as you. They're my favourite events, and I love doing them. Unfortunately, I've got something booked for June, which is more than likely going to be cancelled now. I'm looking at maybe postponing it, but because it's a very sunny country that we're going to, I don't think I'm going to be able to postpone it to any time later in the year because of the weather.
Yeah.
My question was going to be, I'm looking at a contingency. Do you know any online companies where I could do maybe an incentive voucher scheme? Because I'm having to look at that route now rather than actually being able to send. And it's a real shame. I feel really sorry for our winners this year, because
Yeah.
it put me going, this is what you could have won. But
Where are you
unfortunately,
supposed to be going? Where was the plan?
so actually have the Jumeirah Hotel booked in Mallorca,
Oh.
and it's an absolutely amazing venue. I had Jeep safaris booked. I had exclusive views of a really beautiful restaurant in the in the marina. All these different activities booked, and it just looks like it's all going to have to be cancelled, unfortunately.
Mm.
So obviously I'm working with the DMC on that. That's why I was asking the question about DMCs as well. So what I'm looking at the moment is, what money have I got left out of my budget once I've paid all my cancellation fees?
Mm. Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Um, so I think I actually love that idea. And if someone isn't doing voucher-based incentives, then I think you should copyright it and do it, because it's a really good plan. And yeah, someone must be out there. I've heard of it, but I can't think of a company off the top of my head that would do it. I know that there are some DMCs that are like global DMCs that have DMCs from different places, and they might be able to advise you. But yeah, I can't think of a name off the top of my head. But I'll give everyone my email address at the end of this, and if you want to contact me
Okay.
and we can kind of keep chatting about it. I think with a bit of time, I think I can probably come up with a couple of suggestions for you.
Oh,
But
that'd be
yeah,
amazing. Thank
feel your
you.
pain.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lorraine. And we are running a little bit over, but Meg has a question, and so this will be the last question. Meg, why don't you put your camera on and say hi to Zoe? Hi, Meg, are you there?
We can see you, we can't hear you, Meg.
Oh, bless you. You need to switch your microphone on.
Oh, yes, you're very quiet, but
Sorry,
okay.
microphone's not that good.
There we are.
It was just a quick one, really. It's just wondering, how did you make the step into international events? So obviously, it's quite easy to stay
Mm.
domestic because it's where you know, and it's easy to get to know suppliers in different cities, and they're easy to travel to. But just interested to know your own story, really.
Yeah, yeah. I was made redundant from the job that I had. I was living in Leeds and I was working for PwC, and I did events in like Leeds, Manchester, just sort of like local cities. And I was made redundant, and I was a bit like, oh, I don't really know like what I do from this point. And the reason I was made redundant is because they changed. They were like, we're not having regional event managers anymore. We're doing it all from London. We're gonna. And I just thought, well, you know, this is my personal experience, but I just thought if the events jobs are in London, then I'm going to go to London. So I like packed my bags and I moved to London. And you know, at that point, I had the choice of taking my redundancy package and going traveling for a few months or years and just like enjoying travel because I love travel, and coming back and starting work. But then I was like, well, I'll come back and I won't have any money left. So I came here deliberately to find jobs, and I just only really applied for jobs with events teams that did international events. And for me, that was focusing on corporate. I was kind of in corporate events already, working for PwC. You know, corporate events are big for their international programs, and big business centres, doesn't have to be in London, but big business centres across the world are where you're going to find those teams that do international programs.
Great stuff. Thank you. Hope that answers your question, Meg. Good stuff. Thank you. Well, listen, we've run out of time today. So I just want to say thank you, first of all, to Zoe. Zoe, thank you for giving up your time today and taking us through your top 10 tips. Sorry, your top 8 tips. It's been a really, really good session today. And I've learned a lot, for one thing. And thank you to everybody for joining us. The students currently training with us, thanks, guys. And crack on with your course. And people who are considering buying a course with us, I hope you've got something out of today. If you would like to join us tonight, we're having an open evening, an open event with myself and some of our alumni students, and that starts at 6:30, and you can get all of the links through either our website or going and talking to our admissions team, info@eventacademy.com. And for those of you who don't need any more convincing and want to buy a course, we are doing a 10% deal for Easter. So any courses that you buy over the Easter holidays up until next Tuesday morning, you get 10% off. So enjoy the rest of your day, enjoy the sunshine, and please, everybody, stay very, very safe this coming weekend. Thank you so much. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.